What's up, everyone? Tara Roberts here with Fantasy Pros, bringing you my top 10 waiver wire ads for Week 13. Before I get into the list, if you want a chance to win a signed Jonathan Taylor Indianapolis Colts jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10, Atlanta's defense. If you follow my waiver wire content, you know I never include a defense, but this is a special occasion. Target the Atlanta defense on waivers this week. Ironically, Atlanta is one of the defenses that scored in the top 10, and they did so via multiple turnovers and a pick six. And they've made their way onto my waiver wire list because I like them to repeat that production this week against the Jets. The Jets intend to start Tim Boyle again, which has to be one of the most perplexing choices of 2023, but they're doing it, so we are taking advantage of it. Tim Boyle is a turnover machine. He's played essentially 1 1/3 game this season and has thrown 3 interceptions to 1 touchdown pass. And that's par for the course with him. At this point in his career, he has a total of 4 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Oddly enough, that's even better than his college statistics. The man is a walking pick six, and adding Atlanta's defense is a strong move this week. Number 9, A.T. Perry. 1 week after a breakout game and his first career touchdown, A.T. Perry gave us an absolute dud performance of just 1 catch on 2 targets for 7 yards, but we might have to take a leap of faith and add him on waivers. Chris Olave suffered a concussion, and Rashid Shaheed is dealing with an injury as well. The Saints are already down Michael Thomas, and this receiving core could look drastically different next week. I don't have the Saints snap count yet, but if Olave and Rashid Shaheed are out, Perry's competition is Lynn Bowden and Keith Kirkwood. So yeah, I am more than willing to take a leap of faith that Perry can separate himself here. Perry has size, skills, and was a deep dynasty waiver wire darling all off season. The Saints face Detroit this week, and I've talked about this before, Detroit is a plus matchup. With Jared Goff throwing for volume in one of the league's top tandem backfields, Detroit's matchups tend to be high volume affairs. You can add A.T. Perry. Number 8, Curtis Samuel. There was a time earlier in the season when Curtis Samuel was neck and neck with Terry McLaurin as the most productive receiver for Washington. And that's not really an anomaly as much as we would like it to be. Samuel was wide receiver 34 in total points last season. He is a critical part of the Washington offense. But Samuel has struggled over the past month with production after suffering an injury and missing games and being limited. But in week 11, he had a healthy 55% snap count, 9 receptions on 12 targets for 100 yards. He's not fancy, but he gets the job done. And this week's matchup against Miami isn't a layup because they're much healthier on defense, but that top defensive coverage isn't going to be focused on Samuel, so he could benefit from being the higher targeted player, similar to what we saw in Dallas last week. He's worth an ad, mustache, and flex consideration. Number 7, Greg Dortch. This waiver wire ad will probably make you call me crazy, but hear me out. If you're loyal to Fantasy Pros and a loyal Fantasy Pros consumer and you followed my waiver wire videos in the past, this is not the first time that I have advised Greg Dortch as an add and start while you can kind of player. Greg Dortch found his way onto my waiver wire list multiple times in 2022 because there is a very clear trend with him. And I was skeptical if it would actually repeat without Cliff Kingsbury, but it has. Greg Dortch straight up produces if you give him the snaps. Dortch isn't used when the Cardinals receiving core is healthy. Production just simply doesn't go past the wide receiver 3 for them. But when a receiver goes down with an injury, Dortch gets a boost in snaps and is money for double-digit fantasy points in PPR. Dortch had 5 double-digit fantasy point performances in 2022, and he's got back-to-back performances with Michael Wilson dealing with a shoulder injury. Wilson didn't practice at all last week, which generally means you weren't even close to playing. If Wilson is out again, expect Dortch to step up and be a flex option again in week 13. Number 6, Demario Douglas. New England's offense is in a tailspin, and I doubt it's stopping, but that is not stopping me from recommending Demario Douglas this week because it's pretty simple with Douglas. He's the wide receiver 1 for the Patriots, and that's stuck even with the return of Devontae Parker. Douglas has had a steady stream of targets and is efficient with them despite the terrible quarterback play, and he's essentially a player you can plug into your lineup for 10 fantasy points and feel extremely confident that he can get it. He's done so in 4 of the past 5 games. If you need a high upside swing, he's not your guy. If you need a steady, reliable bench asset that you can plug in for a flex option and know you won't get blanked, add Douglas. And honestly, despite the awful quarterback situation, this week they play the Chargers and his ceiling could definitely raise up in this matchup. Do note that he did take a brutal hit and there was fear that he had a concussion, but he spoke after the game and said that he doesn't have one, so just monitor the situation. Number 5, Matt Stafford. I plan to go a different route for streaming at quarterback this week because there are several guys with easy matchups this week. But sometimes it's better to go with the most stable option, even if it's a difficult matchup. And this week, that is Matt Stafford. The Rams play Cleveland, a very tough matchup defensively. Stafford is coming off an excellent performance, his best of the season from a fantasy perspective with 4 touchdowns. We haven't seen that Matt Stafford in a long time. And while this matchup is awful this week, the Rams are at full health, and with Kyren Williams back, the offense just looks far more competent. And that might be the key here. We saw Gardner Minshew light up the Browns defense in week 7, and that was with a fully healthy Colts offense attacking aggressively on the ground. I would lean into Stafford's dependability this week as the best streaming option at quarterback. Number 4, Jeff Wilson. It was a Raheem Mostert day, but don't overlook the production that Jeff Wilson had. Wilson had been wildly irrelevant all season long, but the Dolphins were forced to actually use him when both Devon Achane and Savon Ahmed went out. Wilson had 11 carries for 56 yards and 3 receptions for 17 yards, a very solid day. It's possible that Achane comes back this week because the Dolphins said the injury wasn't really long-term and didn't really place an extended timeline on him. But they might actually end up giving him an extra week here because the Dolphins face Washington. And while Washington's efforts have been admirable from an offensive perspective, Miami's offense should absolutely destroy their defense with or without Achane. Wilson could be the RB2 in one of the highest volume offenses in the league and a matchup against one of the worst defenses in the league. Don't bid aggressively, but he is absolutely worth an add to hedge on the side of Achane being out. Number 3, Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer is eligible to come off of IR, but even if he doesn't make his return this week, he is still a strong add on waivers. Your fab investment will be low because most fantasy managers aren't grabbing a guy off of IR until they know for sure that he'll be back, and we haven't gotten a clear heads up around him and his availability. But go ahead and make your claim because there is zero doubt that when Palmer comes back, he steps immediately back into the wide receiver 2 role for the Chargers. There is no major explanation needed here. Palmer's upside isn't massive, but prior to his injury, he had 4 straight double-digit fantasy point performances. His competition had 4 weeks to step up and failed miserably. Palmer is a solid bench piece with weekly flex appeal. Number 2, Pat Freiermuth. Pittsburgh entered its official post-Matt Canada era, and while it wasn't anything spectacular, they got the win, and Kenny Pickett had his best performance of the year. The Steelers should be able to walk away from this game and feel like they took the right approach. And a big part of that approach was leaning into a guy who might just be their most reliable pass catcher, Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth returned from IR last week to just one target. But this week, he got 11 targets, catching 9 of them for 120 yards. It just flat out worked. And while the receivers have struggled with drops, maybe the Steelers focus on reliability and make sure that Pat Freiermuth is a big part of its offense moving forward. And this week he faces Arizona. He is an absolute must-add if he's on your waiver wire. Number 1, Jaden Reed. Jordan Love is on a little hot streak here with 7 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks, and Jaden Reed has been a beneficiary with 2 receiving touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. The offense has been flowing better, and while we haven't seen a massive uptick in volume for Reed, it's clear that he has been very consistent, and Matt LaFleur is focused on increasing Reed's involvement. The week isn't over yet, so I don't know exactly where Reed officially sits in terms of wide receiver rankings over the past 3 weeks, but he has averaged nearly 18 fantasy points over that time period, and that is low-end wide receiver 1 production. It's not flashy and it's not fancy, but he's getting the job done, and the beauty of Reed is that he's got multiple avenues to achieve fantasy points. This added wrinkle of rushing attempts gives him that Deebo Samuel light role. On top of all of that, The way that we know this production is trending towards being consistent is that we're also seeing it tied to an increase in snap count. The road ahead isn't easy for the Packers passing attack, with matchups against Kansas City and then 2 layup matchups followed by Carolina and Minnesota. But that might actually benefit Reed. He is a must roster. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Jonathan Taylor Indianapolis Colts jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.